Yeah, all good. All good. Just gone for a nice, peaceful evening walk. Beautiful spring evening, and nearly 8 o'clock over here. And an hour and a half or so, I'm going to log on to Zoom and do a Zoom call, the session with the Australasian Soccer Academy. It's 9 hours difference now, England and Sydney, so I'm going to log on and do a session. I do like Zoom session every couple of weeks to do a bit of metacognition and well-being and preparing mentally for games type stuff. And they're a fantastic group of players. And I was doing a bit of reflecting this week while I was putting the sort of session together for them. The question's been asked a few times around that hotbed of Australian football in southwest Sydney in the early 90s. And I suppose it was this sort of highly competitive street forged football culture we had in the Fairfield area and surrounding suburbs, be it Smithfield, Wetherill Park, Bosley Park, Horsley Park, around those areas around there, and in southwest Sydney, and I suppose that it would end up being a legendary hotbed for Australian football talent in the 90s, and I mean, as youngsters, we weren't just playing for teams; we were playing for hours every day. Park and driveways and backyard, and it was really competitive against tough opposition. Really competitive. We've got that street forged football, and I didn't play for a club for a long while. All I did was play a bit of local football, but then I didn't play for a good few years. And I followed the game. Obviously, I was a big Napoli fan to watch them on TV, and obviously to watch on TV Italy at the World Cups and that sort of stuff. So I always had an interest in the game. In 1990, finished school, and I suppose like a lot of people around that area of that generation, we're kind of making our way in the world. You weren't quite sure what we're going to do next, really. I finished school. I was doing a bit of factory work here and there, and I looked at sort of tech or technical college, TAFE, and what courses were available and how to go at a couple of courses. But it was one of them, really. You kind of, a lot of us were making our way in the world and I think, what do we do now type thing. And football was a way to kind of escape that reality. So we'd spend hours just playing football nearly every day, and 2v2s, 5v5s, and so on and so forth, against good opposition. And it was through that there was a lad that lived just street away from me. His name was Elias Navarrete, and he was a phenomenal player, one of the most skillful players for his age I've ever seen to this day. Incredibly skillful player. He really was. His aspiration was to play professionally. He was Chilean heritage, and I think he came over to Australia at a young age, and he was born, I think, and grew up in Chile to a point, and came over to Australia at a young age. But he was incredible skill-wise, and we'd even take on 11 players at times and win. And a lot of it wasn't down to me, it was down to his skill. But we'd play against 5, and we'd play against some high caliber peers. We'd play at a place called Smithfield Park. And it was incredible. People used to travel from everywhere to play us around the area. And, as you do type thing, we'd up for a game. It's like, turn up, let's have a game, and you're on the way. And that kind of street forged football culture. And I suppose at that point, to be honest, it was through Elias at the time. He said, when you play for a team again, I thought, I'm on an hour, and he had a few contacts, and I ended up playing for Granville Chili, as I called it at the time. I think they changed their name in '95 to the Wanderers. I think they changed their name again. But yeah, and I suppose I started signed to play for them, and it was in State League One. And I wasn't really that sort of keen, to be honest, to drive all the way to Granville 2-3 nights a week and play on Sunday. But I went along with it, to be fair, and type thing. And if nothing else, at that point, I was more interested in sort of like, I mean, grunge was a big thing back then. I was really into my grunge music, and I was trying a few different instruments and the drums, and I was probably more inclined to want to play in a grunge band, really. But yeah, I sort of played, and at that point, and as you do, and I'd play five-a-side with some mates at a five-a-side centre on a Friday night, and then I would end up playing futsal at a high level. I decided in the end, I may as well play pretty high level at futsal, and really enjoyed that too. After the season with Granville, I went to Concord Juniors. That was at State 2, I think it was. It would have been about 94, I reckon, or 95, around about then anyway. But long story short, even at Concord Juniors, to be fair, probably didn't have it was a long way to travel as well, drive-wise. But I sort of enjoyed it there, I had a couple of injuries there, and I couldn't really hit the ground running as much as I wanted to. But at that point, funnily enough, someone recommended to work with a track coach, and I did. I found this sort of track coach over at Narrabeen, the track there, and he was fantastic. And that's how pretty much I fell into doing a bit of athletics as well too at the time. Like I put a bit of pace on, a lot of pace, I should say. But yeah, and more to the point, yeah, it was a perfect storm, really. I think it was a perfect storm between that street forged football culture, but also the diverse demographic. Fairfield, by that point, the late 20th century, it had one of the highest migrant populations in all of Australia, I think. And I stand corrected. I'm pretty sure that was the case, to be honest. I mean, we had friends from everywhere, really, who came from everywhere around the world. And the point of that, where football's concerned, is the common ground, common language was football. You connected through people through football. You had migrants from everywhere around the world, so to speak. Be it South America, be it Croatia, Greek, Italy, so to speak, and Southeast Asia and Middle East. The common ground was football. We'd play football, and it was incredible, so to speak. And it was almost like, I would say, with the culture in Australia at that time, it heavily favoured rugby league, at least rugby league in New South Wales, and cricket. And we used to play a lot of rugby league as well, to be fair. We used to play rugby league as well, and cricket too. But I suppose with football, it was almost like a cultural sanctuary to a point. You kind of celebrate your heritage, through the global game, through football. And I think that it was that sort of perfect storm. Wasn't one thing at that place in time. It was the street forged football culture was highly competitive. Really, really competitive. And I think that, with the diverse demographic and sort of cultural thing, you had the emergence of a hotbed for Australian football and talent. And there were footballers going and making it on the world stage. And I would go so far to say there were players, there were footballers, just through playing in the park or going down to Smithfield Park, they were probably equally as good, if not better, than some of the ones we saw make it on the global stage. There was some incredible talent. But for one reason or the other, they didn't break through. It might have been lack of support, it might have been desire, it might have been just basically, knowing how to go about it type thing. There are various reasons, to be fair, to be honest, and why. And sometimes there's, talk about the luck element, right time, right place as well. But that's what I think for me made it that kind of unique hotbed for talent. But that's sort of my take on it. It'd be great to see your take on it. You sort of watching the video and you've got a take on it. It's always interesting to see what your take on it. But that's sort of my take on it. But it's always good to see what other people's thoughts are as well.